Getting comfortable in my chair. Greetings, fellow keepers of the lake. I've been playing D&D for, I don't know, maybe 2 years now, and most of that time as a DM. And when I first started, running the games, I had the problem where you start Googling, you start, scouring the internet, and everything you find is just, more tools, more trackers, more add-ons, more, clips for the DM screens, and DM screens for your DM screens, and it was a mess. And in my mind, I cannot fathom that many things happening in front of me at once. I can only look at one index card and that's it. If I change my focus, everything just goes away. So when I saw that Professor Dungeon Master from Dungeon Craft actually has a philosophy, keep everything in one A4 papers, like a notebook page, and just everything is there in front of you, no flipping, no tables, no anything. You just have it in front of you, just play by using that. And I started developing a technique how I'm going to do that sort of thing. Now I still run very sandboxy games. I usually have an idea where my players are gonna go, and now when they are bigger level, we of course have a discussion where do you want to go, what should I prep for the next session and all that. But usually I just have a lot of random stuff that could happen, and I have to cover all of that. So I'm making a small video series where I will go through each of the little things I've gathered along the way. Nothing too mind-blowing or anything, but good place to start if you want to run from just one page in your notebook. Today we are going to talk about what I call narrative nuggets. I'm working on a name still, but we'll call it narrative nuggets. And yeah, basically it's little 1-2 sentence chunks of text that inspire you. They focus on the flair and the fluff of the world, not engaging the players per se. When you, for example, look at modules, there are examples of these, but they're never mentioned as their own category, as their own GM prepping technique. So let's roll the intro and take a bite out of those narrative nuggets. Oh my god, that's horrible. Right, so I hope you liked that intro. I actually filmed that when I was in Egypt last week, and I took a copy of Karen with me and a small traveler's guide to the Ekelon Forest, I think, a small booklet with me. I was hoping that I'm gonna play some games with other divers, but as you can see here, that just didn't really work. But luckily, as you can see here, the inhabitants of the sea really enjoyed rolling the dice and we had a blast. Anyways, yeah, narrative nuggets, focus, come on. Basically, when I have everything ready, I have my session thought out, I have all the NPCs, all the things that I want to cover, and everything is ready. I have an idea where my players are gonna go. I would sit down and write around 10, never more than 10 narrative nuggets. Maybe it depends on the length of the session. For example, for a 3-hour session, 6 is more than enough. And usually each of those has 2 or 3 sentences, right? So usually categorize them into 3 different things. Regular or ordinary events, right? Strange, peculiar things that can happen, and random encounters, typical random encounters, which include combat encounters, RP encounters, and traps. Right, so let's start with regular events, or ordinary events, whatever you want to call them. There is a saying, ordinary things are easy, peculiar things are hard, and I think I heard this on Runehammer first, maybe. But yeah, I guess the idea of that is that we can all improvise ordinary things. We can all, we are intimately familiar with everyday stuff, while the weird magical stuff that's happening in the world, that's a bit harder to fathom and improvise. I don't really agree with that. I think a lot of new DMs have a problem to really get a feel for which things are ordinary but add to the backdrop of the world, and which don't. There is a fine line, and to actually write that line, you need to prep it, at least at the beginning. I'll give you a couple of examples from my previous sessions. You can see them on the screen. This one is traveling between cities, and you can see a couple of situations here. Here is another one. This one is interesting because there was a riot in the middle of the city and PCs were in combat with a lot of actors. And I wanted it to really feel like there is chaos happening in the city center. So basically each round I would have an initiative placed for just these random events. Like similar to how layer actions have their own place in the initiative tracker. So basically whenever this initiative number comes up, I would roll a die and just read one of these out loud, maybe add some improvisational flair depending on if the player is engaged with it. And they're very short descriptions, right? Like you can fit them on one index card and have that like behind your screen or something, and it's really convenient, and you just take one of those and plop it in the world, and it adds so many questions to the world. Like you still get that random world building aspect of like random encounters, for example, but it's like you're painting the backdrop of the world, like creating a little buffer for you while you're prepping for the next scene. This is exactly like the bottom-up world building that Hankerin was talking about on RPG Mainframe episode 37. I know I'm a bit cuckoo for remembering that. Basically, what is gonna happen to the mercenary that attacked the protester? Who is the guy on the horse? Like, did the players engage with him? Is he someone important? Spoiler alert, he is. How that would affect maybe the political relationship between the players and the officials of the town they were going to. I don't have the answers to these things. Like, when I write narrative nuggets, I'm not thinking about, like, what is this going to mean? Does it have any meaning? I'm just thinking about cool things like little interludes that could happen. This is very useful, but we don't want only to have like ordinary events. Of course, they are interesting, but we shouldn't forget, like, we're playing RPG games. There is magic or technology or some things that are in correlation to our real world considered unnatural or strange. These are definitely my favorite. If you look at, for example, From Software games, why do they work? Why does storytelling in Dark Souls work? Because it's the art of knowing less. I think I read that something. I cannot credit it. I have no idea where I got it from. But it's the art of knowing less, which basically means you create your picture of the world, right? And then a small detail, just a small detail, doesn't fit in that picture, and it shatters your whole illusion, and it just creates the feeling that the world is mysterious, and you think everything, like the world is one step ahead of you. You're still exploring it, even though you've been here for hundreds of hours. You're still finding things that don't fit, and that's exactly why also soft magic systems work more than hard magic systems. For these narrative nuggets, I would just go as wild as I can without making it like too cliche or too engaging. Of course, you don't want to have a bunch of things happening that will all derail your players from one another. This shouldn't feel like a side quest. This should feel as like an Easter egg, as like a small thing that just tickles their imagination, and maybe 10 sessions down the line there will be something important tied to this. So here is the list of a couple of strange encounters that I used in my previous sessions, and still, like, look how great this is. Like, rolling will saves when something positive happens when you fail them. That's just wonderful. It subverts all expectations, and that's another topic that I want to discuss in these videos. Subverting expectations is more powerful than you can imagine. Like, everything in storytelling is based on it. But I digress again. Okay, before we dive into random encounters, let's talk about inspiration. Like, where do I get inspiration to write these? And of course, when you have to pump out 10 different items for each session, and if you're doing it once a week, twice a week as I am, you have to outsource that thing, right? What I do for ordinary events is I go onto YouTube and I write, like, for example, for the riot, I just write medieval raid of a village, or medieval riot, or best medieval movies with riots. You just try to find a YouTube video that's from a movie or something, preferably from a movie and not the real scene, and look at the details. Look at the things that are happening behind the main character, in the background. You will see a lot of little details that are sometimes improvised, sometimes choreographed, but there is a reason why the directors thought that it is a good idea for that to stay there. And that's how you train your mind to think, like, which ordinary things are adding something to the story, which ordinary things are adding something to the scene. making it less boring, coloring the backdrop. Everything you notice, write it down one under the other. So yeah, after you have written out the list, pick 3 that you like, and the rest goes into the backlog for another time. And the second thing I do, and I do this a lot, and now don't give me shade for this, I'm using AI. I know it's chaos, mind-blowing. It's not gonna replace our creativity, but it's a super fun thing to do for your inspiration. So just take the situation, and this goes for strange encounters as well. Take a situation, describe it to the AI like this, and it will generate 10 totally predictable things. And this is fine for regular events. Like mostly I'll just take a couple like straight from here and maybe rewrite it in my wording. But for strange events, you can like add additional context. You can give examples like a list of previous strange events you had in your world, and it will compile a list for you, and you just use this list as a jumping off point, and it really like cuts down the time I need to do this. You cannot force yourself to be creative. In the beginning it goes slower and the AI is more helpful, and as you do this every week you'll just get used to it. The downside is that you'll have strange things popping into your mind all the time, but hey, maybe it's not a downside, maybe it's good. So now we have our regular events, right? We have our strange, quirky things, and we need like regular encounters, RP encounters, combat encounters, some say puzzles. I did puzzling things. I've never managed to create a puzzle. Yesterday I had a key and a hole, and my players just, no, it doesn't work. I know that it might be me. I know DMs run puzzle games quite successfully, but for me, I can't do it. We have a lot of roleplay all the time, so I wouldn't do an RP encounter, and also I'm leaving space for other narrative nuggets to fill that role. And what we are left with is combat encounters. Prep one of those, prep 2 of those if you have time, and sometimes you'll really feel that you need that combat, you need something to happen, you need that action, but you don't need to use that combat encounter as a combat encounter. Like, for example, you ran out of narrative nuggets and you need one more. Take your combat encounter and transform it into a narrative nugget. And that's what I called the backup option. It doesn't negate your ability to have a combat encounter, but it prolongs it. Like, for example, you're going through a forest and you find an old man that turns out to be a necromancer, and he has a lot of undead sheep following him. Maybe you don't know that they are undead at the beginning. And at the beginning, he's just like yelling at you, cursing at you, party are just like whatever. And you leave him be, maybe you try to investigate a bit. Whatever happens, you don't do combat right now. But then when the time comes, your players are like making camp and you feel pacing-wise that it's a good time to have a combat encounter. They hear someone yelling in the distance, and it turns out that's the old man, and he thinks that they stole his undead sheep, so he's trying to kill them. Think about like the backup option if you're not ready to use that combat encounter. Think about how you're gonna prolong it. Still have the players interact with it, but maybe not go into combat. So yeah, that's all I had for you, and I'm getting a bit more comfortable in front of the camera. Still, like, it's a bit strange. And yeah, if you haven't seen my last video, it's about having a DIY soundboard for your table where, for example, I would just attach it here and cue sounds and songs on the spot. It's like almost like playing an instrument live for your players, and you can make it from like any old keyboard lying around. It's super useful. I've just released a new version. I did a lot of bug fixing, some new features. Please go have a look, and if you already downloaded the version 0.0.2, there is now 0.0.3, so go download that, and it will actually say whenever there's a new version available, so you'll be up to date. And I plan on working on this. This is not a forgotten project. I just have very little free time. Like, this is maybe a 25th thing that I'm trying to do, like these videos. But yeah, going strong. It's important to stay creative. It's important to keep on moving, keep on spreading love, happiness, creativity, beer, all that good stuff. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Farewell, keepers.